Let's talk about the wonderful and powerful tool that is parallel compression. Essentially, parallel compression is duplicating a song, a signal. So let's call it A and B. We now have two versions of the same song. So what you're going to do is really squash version B of the song, whereas you're leaving version A completely intact so it maintains its original dynamic range. So B, you're going to extremely compress it. You're going to really squash it. Then you're going to add a tiny little bit of B to A to complement A. So let's have a look here. We've got a track from Pig and Dan called Naked Nuns. We're going to duplicate it. We're going to add a compressor. Let's go for, in this case, we will use Cubase standard built-in compressor. I'm just going to turn this off on A, so it's not doing any compression at all. Whereas B, it's going to be very much compressed. The reason I have a compressor on both A and B is because some host software doesn't allow for plug-in delay compensation, so you'll get phasing issues. So just to keep it simple, we're going to have a compressor on both, just so that we know the delay is the same in your software of choice, okay? So, on B, we are going to squash it with extreme settings. Now you would never ever apply this amount of insane compression to your main original source. But remember that A's dynamic range is going to remain entirely intact, while B is going to complement A. What I'm going to do in this case, because the drums are quite nice and punchy, I'm going to set my attack really fast, my release quite fast. I'm going to set it to peak. And what this is going to do is really remove the transients. It's going to turn B into a completely flat, kind of lifeless bit of solid audio. As a result, when you add some of B to A, it's going to beef up the overall feeling, the overall sound. So a good idea is to slap on some compression settings, quite extreme ones. Turn down B. Now we have A playing. And we're going to add in a little bit of B and see how it feels. See if it complements A. Okay, you can kind of hear it's definitely doing something. It's definitely complementing A, but it's also, there's going to be a little bit of a volume boost in there, which can be deceiving, as discussed in this month's edition of Future Music Magazine. So what I'm going to do to correct that, I'm going to add a group track, which will be A and B combined. So I'm going to send my outputs of these two tracks to combined. Now A and B are going to be running through this group, and I'm also going to have a third version of this song just as a reference. So this will be the dry, non-compressed, non-parallel compressed signal. So I'm going to mute this. Now this was hitting a peak of -2.9. This is hitting a peak of minus 3.5. So I'm just going to turn this down to match by 0.6. Okay, we volume matched. So now what we're going to hear is the effects of the parallel compression at the same volume as the dry reference track here at the bottom. Now this is a subtle thing, as mastering should be, but a little bit of B combined with A helps bring up some of the quieter sounds. If you look at the dynamic range video tutorial, if you remember the 8:1 ratio that we applied, and we were talking about the effects of overcompression on a human voice, what you've done is on B, you've squashed it so that the quieter sounds and the loud sounds are very similar in volume, and you're adding some of this to A. As a result, A is really sort of beefed up from the bottom up. Essentially, you're maintaining the nice peaks of your original drums through A, but you're also getting a bit of a boost, a bit of a push, more of a solid backbone to your track. It's quite a subtle thing. It really is, in this instance anyway. We could of course apply much more extreme settings and turn it up a little bit just so you hear it a bit more. Turn this down by another 0.4 dB to make that a nice round 1 dB in volume match. Oh, sorry, my mistake. Let me minus. Okay. These are now volume matched. The combined signal just seems a bit more upfront and exciting and in your face, and not at the expense of the peaks, not at the expense of the drums. You're bringing up some of the quieter sounds, you're making it more involved. But you're still maintaining that nice original feeling, that power. So as you can see, this is an extremely useful tool in mastering, especially in dance music when you're dealing with samples. This is kind of layering a little bit. It's a powerful thing when used correctly. Do not push too hard, because then you're really digging into dangerous territory where you're starting to become overpowered by the really compressed signal. You really want A to be the focus and B to complement A. But this is useful, and this is something that I would use on a day-to-day basis. Again, it's extremely important about respecting the original audio and trying to work with the audio, not against it, when it comes to compression and mastering. You want the original source to do the hard work, and you want your compression to complement that and not overstep its mark or overstay its welcome. So in a nutshell, that's parallel compression. You can also achieve the same thing without this setup where they're bussed to the group if you're using a compressor that has a wet-dry function. So you would set the signal to completely dry and dial in extreme compression settings, and then slowly turn your compressor's wet-dry slider towards wet and see the effect it's pretty much the same thing. I quite like doing it this way. It gives you a bit more flexibility, and then I would apply further processing to the combined signal on its insert channel rather than on each of these. So there you have it. That is parallel compression in a nutshell. An amazing tool, so use it wisely.